So I had this dream. It's not like a hopeful Martin Luther King kind of dream. It's more of those ones that, like, why do you eat weird crap before bed and expect to have a normal night's sleep kind of dreams? You know the ones. Anyway, it was about this robot, and he had lost his job to AI, so he was super depressed. And he lived in this janky apartment, which is strange. But he was standing in front of a stove cooking nuts and bolts, and because it was a dream, all I could think was, man, he's gonna have to get that stuff super hot to be able to swallow it. And then I thought to myself, I'm gonna make him. Let's go. Work. We do a lot of, stuff for movies and stuff. Anyway, we do a lot of robots and some really, famous and not famous ones. But I'm not really a robot guy, so of course I head straight for the junk pile out in the back because, why wouldn't you? And it's probably toxic and, has, forever chemicals all over it. But, this is all I got. I don't know what else to do. Hey, look at that stuff. Here's my box of stuff. Since I don't really consider myself a robot guy, I'm grasping at straws here. And I'm looking through old model kits trying to find usable parts or things that I think might be usable. I ended up using so little of what was in those things. But, what are you going to do? But I found this box of little sort of ball joint things. I bought like 14 of those magic helping hands things at this tool store, and they were like $3 a piece. And I was going to do a stop motion puppet, and I never did. So I'm using them now, about 6 years after the fact. And here, you would have seen me beat that thing senseless, as well as those right there where I'm trying to pull these things apart, if I hadn't lost all the footage. So this is going to be a little light on footage because, I erased one of the SD cards. So I got that going for me. Oh, and here's a nice little cutaway where it actually worked. So I ended up finding a bunch of tubes that I was going to use on top of a spray filter. I have no idea what that is. There's a laser light, some model parts. So I think this was literally the only model parts I used off of those airplanes. And then some battery housings, which I thought, that's the body. I'm going to use that. I ended up making the little diorama first because I knew what I wanted him to look like, but I really wanted him to fit into his environment better. So I bashed together this thing out of scrap wood that I had laying around. Okay, I 3D printed a bunch of pipe fittings for the different size tubes that I had, which you'll see in a bit worked out pretty well. It's plumbing, and it doesn't cost $500 to find out that somebody flushed a sock. Anyway, but I modeled all that stuff in plasticity and put it together and made I made a light into a vent, but you'll see that in a bit. So I ran out of plastic, so I just took a bunch of cardstock and cut a bunch of shapes, and I glued them all to the walls of the room, just to get some dimension. But I usually would use plastic, but the paper worked out perfectly well. You just have to use cardstock. And this would, work without a laser. But again, I love cutting things a light. Alright, so no footage of me gluing it on because of the erased card, but you don't need to see everything. Some things can be implied, like the implication that I know how to paint, which I'm not implying here very well. So again, I got some little square shapes that I cut out on the laser again because it was fast and easy, and I wanted to get to the robot, but he needs a place to live. So it's just 3 shapes that could be just randomly put down and kind of look like tiles. And that's all EVA foam, which is not the best thing for a floor, but it's easy to cut. I Mod Podged everything to basically grout it in. And it takes paint well, so that always helps. Using my old Badger airbrush and doing a little spatter paint on it, making a tile floor, just black and gray and white. And an oil wash, and I finally got a hold of some naphtha. And if you've never used naphtha for oil washes, it's the only way to go. You don't have to wait very long at all for it to dry, and it's minutes instead of hours for it to dry. And then you can go back with more naphtha and take it right off without taking the paint off of everything else. The old dry brush. I could have picked a better brush for the old dry brush, but I didn't. So it just takes a little longer. Back doing all the sort of weathering with Copic inks. Doing this with the intent of dry brushing over it again. Probably using that same ridiculous brush I was using. But, an airbrush, it really does make things dimensional really quickly, so. Using stencils really helps too. That helps things pop immediately. It gives shape to things that aren't really there. There are the pipes all primed up and gluing them in. And I made that little thing is a weird little meter. And of course, that was part of the footage that I lost. It was just like a weird little thing with some red lights in it and a vent in front of it that looked kind of cool. And then I made that out of one of the light fixtures I found in the dumpster. And I just ran an LED to it. And then I still don't know what that thing is, but I thought it looked cool and industrial. And adding more pipes. Can't go wrong with that. Could have found a better tool than a pair of scissors, but you know. A better dry brush for this purpose. I think that's just like a Vallejo gunmetal gray. And I used some hot glue in the joints to make it look like it was crusty, and then when I go back in with an oil wash, it'll look better. I hope. Yes, better. So again, this is just alcohol and Copic marker ink. I use a lot of Copic marker ink. It's expensive, but it's just beautiful and translucent, and you don't have to spend a lot of time, messing around with the oil stuff. This stuff dries fast and it gets the job done. So since he's cooking on a stove, I had to build one, and I found this little container. I thought that's perfect. So I 3D printed a few little pieces to go onto it. Those are resin prints. And then I cut the bottom of it off, and then 2 days later realized I needed that extra height, and had to put a piece of plastic under it to boost it up, but whatever, that happens all the time. So here I'm just cutting out the face of the oven where the door is going to go, so I can put supposed to look like a glass door. Just a little bit of plastic, but so the reason I chose this clear container and I printed everything in clear is because what I wanted to do was have the oven look like it was ridiculously hot, and it was glowing but still painted. So here I'm just using some copper tape. It'll enhance the reflection on the inside, and it will also make it opaque in the areas I want it opaque. So here again, I 3D printed these little vents that fit into the top of this thing. Made it look like it was meant to be that way. And then these little pieces will hold the little grills. And again, they had to be clear so that when the light is shown from inside it, it'll make them look like they're glowing hot. Used plasticity to make all these parts. Great program, really easy to use. Anybody thinking about doing any kind of mechanical 3D should check it out. Some stuff from after the lost footage. So basically, it didn't miss much. It was just a kind of a blue paint job. And then I just started weathering it down and realized it didn't have enough detail on the side of it. So I started busting holes in it and gluing on little detail pieces. I found that piece on the back of a electrical receptacle that I bought for my backyard.
That was one of the only airplane pieces that I did use. I'd already had, it painted and almost ready to go when I realized, man, this needs some hoses and some wires and some stuff that makes it interesting. That thing broke off like 4 times while I was filming, and I tried to make it look like, hey, I drilled a bunch of holes and it came out perfectly. It didn't. Again, I work with organic stuff so much more easily. I kind of feel like I'm floundering when I'm doing this kind of stuff. I mean, I can drill a hole. I don't know that I'm the best at like figuring out what makes mechanical things look cool, but I had the dream, let's do this thing. And once again with the naphtha and oil paint washes, which again, awesome. That little LED is to light up the frying pan that you'll eventually see. And I found these on Amazon, which were really cool. They have a bunch of different modes, and you can adjust them. There you go. You can see it glowing through the thing and making the top of it look like it's hot and the inside lighting up. So that was what I was going for. J. Edgar. If you get that joke, I'm sorry. So he needed a pet. So I took a salsa container and the top of a automotive paint filter and made a little Roomba vacuum for him. Equal parts flying saucer and Roomba vacuum. I ended up putting lights inside of them, and I think that they only worked in a few of the shots at the end. I was so distracted by getting it done and making it look cool that I forgot some of the cool parts. So obviously a simple paint job. He was just a little added bit to this whole thing. And I feel bad that I lost a bunch of the footage, and this video is not going to have as much, content as my other ones have, and I feel bad about that. I try to make them interesting so that people, can have fun watching them and also maybe learn something or learn not to do some of the dumb things I do. But I do this because I really enjoy it, and I hope that everybody can tell that I enjoy it. I mean, I make fun of the things I do and I make fun of myself a lot, but I really do enjoy this. So if you guys like it, subscribe and drop a comment. It's always appreciated. This is not the best paint job in the world, but you know what? It's perfectly fine. I cleaned up a little spot on the floor with the little naphtha so that he has a place to live. All right, the robot himself, there he is. So I 3D printed the head because that was what I saw in my brain, and I knew I wasn't going to find the right part for it, especially at scale. And I printed little caps for his knees and his elbows, and I used the little joints that I had saved for 5 years, and kind of basically made a stop motion guy. Just used wood dowel and sleeved over some plastic tube, and using EVA foam for the soles of his shoes, which were just little shapes of wood that I cut out and put the pieces onto, and was able to slot in a little notch for where his leg goes into, so he's locked down to the shoe. I use a lot of Propoxy. It sets up really fast and really hard, and it's really expensive, but it really works. So those are the battery holders that I found in the trash. Cut it down, and I'm starting to get the scale of what the body is supposed to look like here. Yeah, I needed to cut it down by about 1/3, and yeah, that's better. Don't be an idiot. Do it right. So I'm kind of glad I used these little stop motion looking joints for him, because I didn't have to decide on the pose right away, and they were relatively easy to use. Get them in, and you didn't have to lock them into place. You could kind of decide on the pose as you went. Some more of the airplane parts. I swear I used like 8 little pieces from all those models. Those things conveniently fit in the, I think it was an 8mm tube. They slotted in, and then a piece of dowel could fit in there, and you could just screw it right into the other piece, and boom, you had an arm. More lost footage from the archives. Yeah, I made hands. I just ran wires into them and used beads for the fingers. That's very bill making stuff, sort of bead bot technology. Lots of hot glue on this guy. I didn't want to use super glue because I wasn't sure I was doing what I wanted to do, so I wanted to be able to take it apart, and super glue gets so crusty and weird. Yeah, I was so unsure I left all the joints like super long. There's the other parts that I found. These little, look like pneumatic actuators, or some kind of pistons that would work his legs. I found matching ones, so of course those are going on. So I wired up some LEDs for his eyes and inside of his head, which of course part of the lost footage, but I had to be able to slot them into the body and then hide the wires, so I did a little maneuvering. And I used some of those paper cutouts that I did on the laser cutter that I used on the walls as pieces to cover the wires, which that worked out cool too. And there's his on-off switch. And I don't care that the scale is wrong. I think those are Model T headlights. And two more little actuators that I found, just to give it a bit of scale difference. A bead and some tube to make actuators for the shoulders. And those are the shoulder caps that I printed, and you know, it wasn't a cop out. It was just like, that's what I saw in my head. It's like, I just want these simple little, you know, caps. Okay. So here's the little guy, and then I primed him, and he disappeared. But you know, I put this orange EVA foam behind him, and the entire time I thought, oh, he's going to be blue. And I put that behind him, and I was like, you know what? Orange. Orange is the color he needs to be. So, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know how much I love painting. Yeah, I don't love painting. But painting this kind of stuff, and in the style that I wanted it to be, it wasn't that bad. So this is just acrylic, and I broke out the airbrush and made it all even. So it's true that if you use pink, you can paint yellow over the top of it, and it becomes more vibrant. And the more vibrant the pink, the more vibrant the yellow. I know, color theory is pretty stupid. Yeah, yellow. There it is. Yellow never covers properly, and then all of a sudden, you put pink down and it does. So again, I always envisioned this guy some kind of like sorting robot or something, and he was in a factory, and he just has that very factory robot vibe. Perfect kind of paint job for me. One where you can use a crappy brush and not cover everything well, and then cover it with, you know, oil and walk away. Again, can't say enough about oil wash. It makes everything look intentional, whether it is or not. You can see I added a little bit of dry brush silver already that I didn't show. But, I mean, there, I'm doing some more. One thing I didn't do that I wanted to do was go into each of the lines with a graphite pencil, which that also helps it look like it darkens the lines, but it also makes it look like there's a bit of a silvery finish to it. And I figured if he's an assembly line robot or a counting robot, that there'd be more than one of him. So he's 3. And I didn't put pink under that because when I scratched it up, it would have shown. So little silver for depth. Did it work? I don't know. Maybe. You have to say these things when you're narrating. Little sandpaper. Oh, here we go. There's some aging on the dome. It was supposed to be like an aged version of like an old iMac. I don't know if it ever really showed the lights well through it, but you can tell it's translucent, so it's cool. Yeah, so the eyes were a little bit bright, so I used dark blue ink, almost black, to basically fog them over, and then just took a little Q-tip and wiped off the tips. So it's real kind of a strange optics thing. All right, here's the frying pan that I dreamt of. And I knew from the get-go that it had to be clear so that I could get that glow. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it and make the pan look black, but I just did a faded paint job with the Copic inks, and that seemed to work out pretty well. There you go. Molten nuts and bolts.